Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my January reading wrap up. I didn't read a ton of physical copy books this year. I mostly stuck to Kindle books, but I do have a few. I have some really good books, I have some okay books, so let's just hop into it. So we're going to start with my monthly reading stats. So I read 18 books. I actually might finish a book. I'm recording this on the 31st, so I might be able to finish one more book today, but I'm not sure about that, so I'm going to just stick with the 18 that I have read. It's going to be like a 50-50 shot if I actually finished or not. My absolute favorite book this month was Juniper Hill. I'll talk about it more coming up, but I absolutely loved that book. There's a reason why it's hyped up so much on books, Book Talk, Bookstagram, BookTube. It's hyped everywhere, and it's for good reason. I read 6,261 pages and listened to 69.83 hours of audio. I didn't DNF any books this month. I really should be better at DNFing books, but I still have not been able to get myself to DNF a book yet. We'll see if that changes throughout the year. I read 4 physical copy books, 9 digital books, whether that be on my Kobo from my library or Kindle, and 5 audiobooks. My top 5 genres from the month were romance, fantasy, contemporary, historical, and LGBTQIA+. And finally, because it is only January, I am at 18 out of my 225 goal books read this year. So the first book that I read this month is Beautiful Player by Christina Lauren. This is the 3rd book in the Beautiful Bastard series by Christina Lauren, like I mentioned. I read it as an audiobook on Scribd, and I really did enjoy this. This is probably my least favorite of the series so far, honestly. The tropes in this one just weren't my favorite. I preferred the tropes in the previous 2 books to this one, so that's why it wasn't my favorite. I think the second one is probably my favorite that I read. But overall, I gave it 4 stars. So the second book I read was Feral Wolf by Suzanne Valenti and Carolyn Peckham. This is the 3rd book in the Darkmoor Penitentiary series, which is a sequel series to ZODIAC Academy. I think the first book takes place 5 years after the end of ZODIAC Academy. This is probably my least favorite series of that world, just because, I don't know, I think maybe it's the storylines. I'm just like not as interested in this one. But I do really like Rosalie, who is the main character. I liked this book, I think, the most of the series, but it should have been, this book should have been so fast-paced, and it was, but there were still so many times, because I don't want to spoil anything, because this is the 3rd book in the series. This book should have been like action-packed, but there were so many times when they just stopped. And I'm like, why are you stopping? You don't have much time left. Keep going. So that was bothering me and frustrating me throughout the book a little bit. But I did really like it. I gave it 4.25 stars. I would definitely recommend this whole world because it's just a lot of fun. But I know a lot of people don't read the prequel and sequel series of ZODIAC Academy, have only read ZODIAC Academy. I really recommend you pick up the other books in this world. Then I read The Awakening as Told by the Boys, which is like the first book just from only the boys' perspective by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. This book was interesting because it was interesting to go back and see the character development from when they came from, but I really don't think it was necessary. It was just like nice to see, I guess, but I just don't think it was a necessary book. I don't think a lot of the sort of novella and this book was more pages than the first book, which was really not necessary in my opinion. So I gave it 3.75 stars. I know that sounds like actually really high for what I just said, but I just love the characters so much that I honestly still really enjoyed the book, but I don't think it's necessary to read. I don't think you're missing anything if you don't read this book. Then I listened to the audiobook for Lessons, which by Giselle Bundchen. This is a memoir about her life, and honestly, this is the only reason I read this was because it was for a book club. If I'm being I don't really rate memoirs just because I feel weird about rating other people's lives. So I don't typically rate memoirs, but if I did, this would probably be pretty low if I'm being honest. There's some parts that were like interesting, I guess, but like it was kind of tone deaf a lot of the book in my opinion. And especially because I don't know. I just I don't know. I just we don't need to talk about this one for very long. I only read it because of my book club. Then I read The Hardest Fall by Ella Mays. This is a sports romance. I actually did a reading vlog about this book and the next book in the series, so I won't talk about them too much because you can go watch that vlog, and I also talked about it in my sports romance recommendations, so I don't want to keep blabbering on about these books. I really liked this one. I did think there was some added traumatic elements into the book that just were not necessary, and it did really take away from the book in my opinion, just because I thought it was so unnecessary to have a pretty on page traumatic part for absolutely no character development, and yeah, character development or plot development. It just was not necessary. So that I took 0.5 off that, so I gave this book 4.5 stars. Then I read Most Valuable Playboy by Lauren Blakely. This is the first book in the Ballers and Babes series, and this was actually a reread for me. Again, this is in 2 other vlogs, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. I gave it 4.25 stars. I think that I liked it about the same as the first time I read it. I really like the characters, and like 70% of the book I was like, this is definitely a 5-star read, or at least really close to a 5-star read. But the last like 30% of the book, I just feel like it was very rushed. There was like, I don't know, there's just a lot of things that I would change about the ending, so I only gave it 4.25. Then I read One for the Sorrow, which is the 7th book in the D.I. Kalanick series by Helen Sarah Fields. This is a series that I first started when I was getting back into reading, and the 7th book came out last year, so it's been like, I want to say like 2 years maybe since I read the 6th book, but I was surprised that I did remember a lot of the characters and stuff like that. I did really like the books, but I've read so many better books by now that like, I don't know, and there were some really weird things for the characters to do. I do think that there's going to be an 8th one coming out. Do I think I'll read it? I'm not sure. I don't know, I might, just because I really want these 2 characters to get a happily ever after, and they still have not gotten it. So I might read the 8th one just because for that reason. But yeah, it was like, honestly, it was just okay. I've just read better books. I think the plot was fairly predictable. I didn't guess it quite what it was, but I guessed pretty well the wrap up of it, so I gave 3.5 stars. Then I listened to the audiobook for Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. This one, I don't know if this was, I think this book probably would have been a lot more powerful reading it like a physical copy or like digitally or something, like actually reading the book rather than listening to the audiobook, because it is told in verse, but I just don't think it's the genre for me. So I gave it 3.25 stars. Yeah, I think that this book was just not good on audio, because if you zoned out for a second, you missed like a whole chunk of the story. And I also felt like it was skipping around a bunch. It was hard to follow the storyline. So, but I think that might have just been the case of an audiobook. So 3.25 stars. I would definitely recommend not the audiobook for this, or at least not just the audiobook for this. Then I read Heartless Sky, which is the 7th book in the ZODIAC Academy series by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. I loved this book in the series, but the ending was, if I had to wait for the 8th book after the cliffhanger that book left me on, I would have rioted. I don't know how people did that. I'm so glad that I'm not only caught up now, because the end of the 8th book was so much nicer than the end of the 7th book. It was actually cruel the way she left off that book. Like, anyways, I loved it. I loved it. So I gave it 4.75 stars. The cliffhanger was my, like, I was like, how dare you leave us off like that? That is just mean. Then I listened to the audiobook of I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shreya. This is another memoir, so I'm not going to rate it, but I really, really liked this book. It was really good, really well done, very powerful for only less than 2-hour audiobook. If you need like something short just to bump up your reading goals, this is a good one to put in there. And it's just like really, really beautifully written. I really liked this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I listened to the audiobook of Echo in the Bone, which is the 7th book in the Outlander series. If you've watched any of my wrap-up reading vlogs before, you probably know what I'm going to say about this book. It's just way too long. I guess they're like mildly entertaining. There's something that happens in this book near the end that I like had to give Steven a spoiler, because this is at this point past the story, past the show. And the reason why I started the series was because I wanted to discuss it with Steven, because he really liked the show. And yeah, I had to give him a spoiler because I just could not believe something that happened at the end of this book. So I gave it 3.25 stars. This one is significantly shorter than the last one, which was great, but still way too long. Then I read Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. I did a whole reading vlog on this one, so again, I'm not going to talk about it for too long, but very cute, very fluffy. Like, it's a perfect, if you're in between like really long fantasy books, it's like the perfect little pick-me-up book. I say it's a solid 4 stars. It's nothing spectacular, like there's nothing super original about the plot or anything like that, but it's just cute. It's so cute and so much fun. The characters are so lovely. I had a really good time reading this, so make sure you go check out that vlog for my full thoughts, although I just sort of gave it to you. I read Sorrow and Starlight, which is the 8th book in the ZODIAC Academy series, and I'm feeling just so much more at peace after reading this book than I was about after reading the 7th book. Not that there was anything that was actually wrapped up, but I actually feel like I can see a glimmer of hope in the future, whereas after the 7th one I was like, this is bleak. I was so sad after the 7th book, but this one seems a lot more like I'm feeling like there is possibility. But if I don't get happily ever after for all the characters next book, I am going to be so mad. So hopefully I can get that. Oh, I guess I should also say this book is like so long. This is, I think it's almost 13,000 pages. And the reason why I liked it so much was because a lot of the like sort of unnecessary point of views from this book were characters from other series, which I really liked being able to see them again, those characters. So I really liked that part of the book, but it was definitely too long. I gave this book 4.25 stars. Then I read First Comes Scandal, which is the 4th book in the Roxby's series, which is a prequel to the Bridgerton series. I don't know if I'll actually read the Bridgerton series, but I like overall enjoyed these audiobooks. Like, I don't know, there was nothing too spectacular about them. This book, I just didn't really think that there was actually much chemistry between the characters or anything like that, which I know some people are going to be mad about that. But I personally just didn't think there was that much chemistry. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite, but I overall enjoyed it. Then I read Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the 2nd book in the Bellinger sisters duology, and I liked this book about the same as the first one. The miscommunication in this book was driving me a little bonkers, and I don't know, it really drove me crazy, the miscommunication, and the fact it had that classic like third act breakup, which I also did not appreciate, although there was like a little bit of a twist on that, but I don't know. It was a good book. I really, like, I was entertained. I liked it a lot, but nothing spectacular for sure. Then I read Juniper Hill by DEVNEY Perry, which is the second book in the Eden series, and I loved this book. I cannot say enough good things about this. The last like 100 pages or so, or like maybe even less than that, like really, I was like, I could not put the book down. I was like whipping through it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. I do have a reading vlog for this one and the next book coming up, so I'm not going to talk about, again, I'm not going to talk about them too much, but this was by far my favorite book of the month. I gave this 5 stars. It was so good. Then I read Maggie Moves On by Lucy Score. I really enjoyed this book. I didn't particularly love the male main character in this book. I will say that this is third person point of view, so I know a lot of people don't like that about this book, so just a warning that that is the case in this book. But I really liked the overall concept of this book. My favorite part though was the dog named Kevin, which is, I have my own dog named Kevin right here. He's actually whining at me because he has to go to the washroom, so I'm gonna like fly through the rest of this video. But I did really enjoy this book, but I think also after I read it right after Juniper Hill, and so like nothing was going to compare to that book. And last but not least is Shadow Kiss, which is the third book in the Vampire Academy series by Rochelle Mead. This one, I love these books. They're so nostalgic for me. I read them all for the first time in high school and just fell in love with the world. I'm so sorry about Kevin in the background. 1 second. Sorry about that. I am gonna need to end this video soon because he's going crazy. But this series is so nostalgic. So I really loved it. I will say that I forgot about the ending of this book, and as soon as I like saw it coming, I was like, oh no, I forgot about this. Quiet. I forgot about this, so I didn't like the ending of this one, and I gave it 4.25 stars. But overall, love the series. Definitely recommend it if you haven't already read it. It's great. It holds up. And that is all the books that I read in January. I hope you guys enjoyed. I have to go take Kevin out, but leave a comment what your favorite book was that you read this month, or if you've read any of the books that I've read and you want to discuss them in the comments. I would love to. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.